The events I'm about to describe to you all happened here in this area over 400 years ago. Some of the detail is quite harrowing, and if you're of a nervous disposition, it's best that you don't watch it, especially if you have children with you. But if you are still with me, lock the doors, close the curtains, get comfortable in your favourite chair, and let me tell you the story of the Bottesford witches. Our story starts in the Leicestershire village of Bottesford. The year is 1618, and it's a very small agricultural village centred around the ford on the River Devon. Three of the inhabitants of the village were Joan Flower and her daughters Margaret and Philippa. They'd been quite a well-off family at one time, but when Joan's husband died, the family fell into hardship. So they took work at Belvoir Castle as servants. Margaret was so well thought of by the Earl of Rutland that she had a live-in position. Mother Flower was known as a cunning woman, as were her daughters. This wasn't used in the modern way, it simply meant that they were healers. This was long before there was any sort of health care supplied, so healers were necessary in the local community. That was fine when they managed to heal people, but if they didn't, often people would blame them for the loss of a loved one. It was said that Joan Flower was unkempt, had sunken eyes and a foul mouth. This probably led to people not liking her. Indeed, there was a lot of bad blood in the village, and Joan was very unpopular, as were her daughters. Of course, it didn't help that there were rumours that Joan and her daughters were entertaining the local menfolk, probably finding another way to supplement their meagre income. It was a 3-mile trek to get to work, and then another 3 miles to get home after a hard day. They would make that journey in all weathers, and they couldn't even stop at Café Alley for a coffee. Partly because Café Alley didn't exist, and also coffee wouldn't be introduced into England for another 30 years. All was well up at the castle, and Margaret was said to be a particular favourite of the Earl. But that all went wrong in the winter of 1618. Margaret was accused of stealing and immediately dismissed. It was strange that on her dismissal, the Earl gave her a feather bolster, a straw mattress and 40 shillings, which was an awful lot of money. It was shortly after that that the Earl's entire family became ill, it's said with convulsions. Now it was winter, so illnesses happened. They lived in a draughty castle. While most of the family recovered, young Henry sadly died, and not long after, so did his brother. The Earl was left without an heir to the title. Somebody had to be blamed. Suspicion fell on the Flower women. After all, they had access to potions. If they could heal, they could certainly make somebody ill. Fingers were pointed, witchcraft cited, and Christmas 1618 saw the women arrested. They were accused of witchcraft, which was a capital offence. They were to be taken to Lincoln Castle, where they'd be interrogated. It was a 40-mile journey from Bottesford to Lincoln, and the party stopped here in Ancaster to rest. It was here that Mother Flower decided to take one last chance, one last roll of the dice. She demanded to be given the old Anglo-Saxon right of causnade, or trial by bread. If the person accused of witchcraft could actually swallow the bread without choking, they were innocent and they'd be free. Mother Flower knew that if they got to Lincoln, that would be the end of them. They were sure to be burnt at the stake. They must have been terribly afraid. The Earl's chaplain, the Reverend Samuel Fleming, was with the party, and it's highly likely he blessed the bread. She put the bread in her mouth, tried to swallow, and choked to death. Now the prison party had another problem. They had a body to dispose of, and not just any body. It was a witch. A proven witch. One thing's for sure, no witch could be buried in the consecrated ground of a churchyard. So traditionally, witches were buried at a crossroads. It was said that this was so that if the witch did wake up and arise from her grave, she wouldn't know which road to take. The truth is probably that nobody really wanted a witch on their land, and as nobody owned a crossroads, it would be the best place for her to go. So it's said that Joan Flower is buried here at the crossroads at Ancaster. I wonder if all these drivers passing over know that there's a witch buried beneath. In fact, I wonder if she really is buried there. If Margaret and Philippa had any hope at all, that hope was gone. They knew now that it was proven that certainly the mother was a witch, so it was likely they were too. We can only imagine the terror that Margaret and Philippa felt as they made that final 20-mile journey to Lincoln, expecting to be burnt at the stake. As soon as the prison party arrived at Lincoln Castle, the interrogation began. Interrogation meant torture, and it wasn't long before the torturers achieved their goal.
They broke us.
Margaret and Philippa made a full confession. They described how they had stolen one of Lord Henry's gloves, rubbed it along the back of their familiar, a cat named Rutterkin, while whispering an incantation. The trial commenced, and everyone that appeared spoke against the women. Soon they were convicted and sentenced not to be burned at the stake, but to be hung. And so it was that on the 11th of March 1619, Margaret and Philippa were taken to the roof of the Cobb Hall Tower, where they were hung by the neck until dead.
We see you.
We'll end this tragic tale here in the Church of St Mary the Virgin in the village of Bottesford. Behind me is the tomb of the 6th Earl, and behind him is quite an unusual memorial. This is thought to be the only reference to witchcraft in an English church. He married Lady Cecilia. They had 2 sons, both who died in their infancy by wicked practice and sorcery. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. But just remember, there's no such thing as ghosts, and the voice of spirits are all just figments of your imagination. So until next time, sleep well.